I was like, when you pair Spielberg with dinosaurs, what do you get? $1 billion. You pair Greta and Barbie, I'm gonna make $1 billion. You were right. Thank God, because I was like, God, I hope this works out.
Hey everyone, welcome to Off Script with the Hollywood Reporter. I'm Yvonne Orji, and we are here at the Georgian, a historic hotel in Santa Monica, California. Now, as you know, the Hollywood Reporter brings the industry's biggest and brightest stars together for legendary conversations. And guess what? Today is no different. We are about to hear from 6 actresses who were in some of this year's most talked about films. From the billion-dollar blockbuster that caused a pink paint shortage, you know what I'm talking about, it's Barbie, to Martin Scorsese's 3.5-hour intermissionless epic. But guys, it was worth every minute. That's right, Killers of the Flower Moon. So strap in, use the restroom now, you have been warned, and let's get ready for a beautiful conversation between Annette Bening, Lily Gladstone, Greta Lee, Carey Mulligan, Margot Robbie, and Emma Stone. They are on the record, but maybe just a bit off script with the Hollywood Reporter. Take it away, Rebecca.
Thanks, Yvonne. Hello and welcome to the Hollywood Reporter's Actress Roundtable. Let's dive in. How would you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
Playing pretend. Playing pretend. I remember playing pretend. I once heard an actress talk about this, and I kind of was like, oh God, that sounds like a little kind of, I don't know, corny. But you know what? I remember playing pretend really well. I remember the feeling of, like, how deep can I get in it? I'm the frontier woman in the backyard, grinding berries. That was one of my faves. and playing mommy. I actually used to play with dolls. But yeah, playing pretend. And it is a grown-up version of that.
Yeah. Greta, how would you explain?
I lie to them, and I have 2 children who are 7 and 4. But I mean, all kidding aside, I mean, it's one of those things where I tell them it's the most important job in the world. I'm saving lives. There's doctor, and then there's me. No, I think, and this is something that becomes more true, I think, just aging. And wanting to appreciate just the burning desire, the love of something, and for me specifically, telling my kids, I love this, and for them to get to see it, I think has been really just wonderful and sometimes very difficult because they don't understand all of it. But it's that shared love of the thing, you know, and sometimes it is hard to put into words. So sometimes then you lie.
Annette, I had heard that when you were on Nyad, you would tease Jodie Foster like right before the director's call to action. Is that true?
I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, I do goof around a lot.
And
it
why?
kind of helps me relax. Sometimes it sort of depends, because some people don't really enjoy doing that, and so you have to be careful. There are some actors who are actually serious. No,
why are you looking at me?
No, I do that sometimes just to keep things loose. And you know, you go in with a lot of uncertainty, and you want that, right? It's like planned uncertainty. You want to try to find something that surprises you and maybe your partner. Jodie is such a fine actress that I felt so lucky, you know, because acting is reacting and listening and just taking from the other person. So, yeah, I probably did do that. I like to have a good time. I like to, you know, goof around.
Emma, I know Yorgos Lanthimos is sort of known for doing these exercises and games and stuff with actors when they're in rehearsals. Did you do that on Poor Things? Was it helpful? What kinds of things?
Well, yeah, I was out there about a month before we started shooting, and we did about 3 weeks of rehearsal, which was similar to the amount of time we had on The Favorite. And it's wonderful because none of it is literal, like you're not blocking out the scenes or going through the lines in the way that, you know, it will happen on camera. So you're doing like games where you're all kind of tied together. I mean, it's true theater games, like, you know, or like everyone has to shut their eyes and walk around, and one person is assigned to put a chair under them as they sit. Like you know, it's just completely silly. So you embarrass yourself in front of each other, and then you kind of get really close really quickly. So by the time you're on set, you feel like you know each other really well, and it's just like you can experiment and be free and make fun of each other, and it's, you know, no kind of eggshell experience with your other actors, which is really, really helpful.
Do other people have like something similar, a way to just sort of quickly get intimate and get comfortable on a set? Anything that's worked for you?
Just so validating, like hearing that from both of you. You know, I'm a goofball on set, and I tend to play really serious roles. And my foundation is in theater, so a lot of these games.
It's a fun job. I mean, obviously there's, like, I'm saying it's fun, and then I saw Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm like, it's fun. Right? Like, obviously there's some like really, really, you know, heavy, emotional, very important stories that are being told, but if you can find the sort of like levity, or at least to me it feels, like you were saying, like it feels so good to kind of have that levity in between, because acting is fun. Like it's you're playing pretend forever.
And a lot of that stuff, I mean, in theatre and in like film is just not feeling like a complete tit when you get, you know, like feel like, okay, you're not going to think I'm, first of all, terrible at this, or, you know, like, and I feel that from like, I need to feel that with the crew as well. Like I need the dolly group to think I'm not shit. Like I need, you know, so I need to, I feel like the best case scenario is when you get there and it's your director, your co-actors, but also the crew are all like, you can't be bad. And then you're in a good place. But it takes away the self-awareness a little bit when like you're happy, everyone feels like they're making the same thing.
And that's one of the great things about film is I feel like when you're in theater, it's such an actor's game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so communal.
It's like summer camp. Should feel like summer camp.
Completely.
But it also helps when you're shooting things like, you know, like you said, it's, and I've said it to everybody that was on set, we have no business having this much fun making this film. But it's also, there were so many native actors and so many native crew and extras, and when we're together, like, I mean, Indians just laugh, you know, which I think helped with sustaining some of the importance of it, because you're surrounded by this is the community that's being impacted, and that makes the tragedy stronger. I mean, we've got that dual mask for a reason. I feel like I kind of need the goofy to like springboard into the drama sometimes. So
Completely. Otherwise, you're just like, the heaviness of it is
you can't live
excruciating. Yeah.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. I am dead serious. This is high art that we're. It's not a joke, Emma. It's not,
Greta's so boring to be around.
Really?
You guys didn't have any.
Barbie was not fun, I bet.
It was
not
fun.
How did you recover at the end of the day?
It was horrible.
Yeah.
I know. Was there?
I lost myself.
Yeah. Was there an on-set therapist for you?
Did you have people call you Barbie? I mean, off camera, I mean?
The funny thing is, in our script, everyone was, because everyone's Barbie and everyone's Ken, everyone's name was in the script. So I'm Barbie Margot says to Ken Ryan. And Barbie Issa says to, you know, like, so all, it's weird seeing your name in a script when you're reading it, you're like, oh.
Barbie
and then
Margot.
just Alan.
Isn't it kind of amazing how it's become like a sort of sisterhood greeting now, where you see people go, hey Barbie. Like, that's just how we talk now.
I had a friend who was like running on the beach and wearing something pink just by chance, and someone was like, hi Barbie, and they yelled back, hi Barbie, and I was like, no, I'm in it now.
How did you think about how Barbie would move? Like what her physicality would be?
That was really fun, and obviously guided by Greta, but
Me.
Yeah.
Greta.
You're welcome.
Because she knew how serious our set needed to be, like her set. No, yeah, it was. I love physical comedy, and I like my favorite era of film is like the 30s, when it's like all head to toe acting, like, you know, because the frame is so head to toe, and it's all. I love screwball comedies, and I love that. So I've always been excited to have the chance to do very physical comedy. But it was also like the line between, I wanted there to be an evolution between how she moved and spoke from the beginning of the film to the end of the film, and it shouldn't be obvious to the audience, but it should, by the end of it, you should be like, oh yeah, I'm looking at someone who's being a doll, and then by the end of it, you're like, I think I'm watching Margot. Like I wanted to kind of by the end have morphed into being human without people realizing, and we did that in a number of ways. You know, like the wig started off with like tons of volume and hair, and then got smaller, shorter, until it looked more like normal, natural hair. And the costumes went, you know, I spoke to Jacqueline, I was like, okay, she's got to have very certain like shapes and a lot of structure and like definite colors, definite patterns. Everything should be constructed, and then as we go by the end, the fabric should be soft, the pattern should be messy but still feminine, and like, so we did, you know, things like that. And then with the physicality, and you know, I would just kind of went from being very certain to kind of uncertain by the end in a good way. So I wanted, you know, my speech pattern to be at the start, like, I'm having a dance party, there's going to be a song, there's going to be this, you should come by. And by the end, you know, the way like when we talk in real life, you have like hesitation and you stumble on words, or like you leave a gap before you say the next thing because you're trying to think of it. So I wanted her speech by the end to have that quality to it, and at the beginning to just be very certain, no hesitation. I can't even remember what your question was.
She was just asking, like, what are you doing later?
We didn't need a soliloquy.
Barbie sounds awesome.
But like I said, just gonna sit in my little strawberry and decorate.
That transition was so fun to watch, though. Like, watching that gear shift and just the human emotions starting to sink in. I mean, I think a lot of us needed that after the last several years.
I felt that on set too. Yeah. Like, people were so excited to be back on set again. And like, it's like we all went for it even more because we were even more great. Like, I think I'm always so grateful that I even get to make movies, but you just felt that everyone was like, oh my God, we get to make movies again. So everyone really wanted to go for it. And Barbie kind of like, that setting and the environment Greta created was very, lent itself to going for it and really like being exuberant and joyful and so silly. I mean, everyone was so silly in front of each other all the time, and yeah, it was amazing. It was so fun. It was like a never-ending dance party.
Greta, hearing Margot talk about the language change in Barbie made me think of you're working in both Korean and English in past lives. How much Korean did you know when you got that part? How much did you have to learn?
I was terrified that I was going to mess up the Korean. I grew up speaking Korean, but it's not, I think it's, I don't know, it's something that's hard to explain unless you are bilingual. It's like I'd forgotten that I could speak Korean because of the life that I was living in America, you know? So right away, that was something that was going to be very vulnerable for me and exposing. But I guess I like to do this thing before I start a job where I kind of make this informal list of, I guess I can just call them like challenges that lie ahead. I like to make it tangible because so much of what we do is so internal. And this list for past lives was, we're shooting on 35 millimeter. I've never done that before. It was my first time playing the lead role after 20 years of working, and I didn't know how to do that. I'd never done that before. And, you know, we were shooting in New York City. It was a time span of 12 years of playing different ages. And the costumes, there was nowhere to hide. I'd come from doing a lot of heightened characters where I could use the makeup or the clothing to, I had none of that. And then at the very bottom of this list was Korean. Speaking almost entirely in Korean was almost like the jacket on top of all of these other concerns, which maybe was helpful in the end. But it's a huge responsibility to accurately portray these certain nuances of what it's like to have that duality, that cultural duality. And I did a lot of funny things where I asked, instead of a conventional dialect coach who could kind of give me the perfect South Korean accent, I asked for this incredible woman, Sharon Choi, who you guys might know as Bong Joon-ho's translator.
Yeah, she's so
I don't know
cool.
if you remember from maybe the Oscars.
The speeches.
The thing with her,
Yes.
she could translate in the moment jokes, which to me was something that
That's true
requires
fluency.
actual genius. I mean, no offense, you're a genius too, but I know you're so relieved. But I really needed to find somebody who could understand. It's similar to what you're talking about. She's trying to show this whole spectrum of this human experience, but this range that isn't sort of wiped clean and made sort of flat. And I needed to find specifically someone who could help me. Even within one scene, the way she starts out sounding after years of not speaking Korean, that she would sound kind of like a white girl. And maybe after hours of talking to her childhood sweetheart in Korean, that she would sound more Korean, and what that means, and showing that whole range. So I felt really so relieved to find her and to have her as a tool.
Hearing you talk about that you had played heightened characters reminded me, I've heard you say growing up you were watching characters played by like Val Kilmer and Nick Cage, and that's what you envisioned for yourself. And it kind of makes me wonder, what did everybody watch growing up and see, you know, a version of what they assumed they would play or what they hoped they would play? Did anybody have a particular performer or type of performance in their minds?
I watched a lot of Goldie Hawn films. Again, that physical comedy, I think I just really enjoy. Great comedian. Really does her whole body with it. And yeah.
I feel compelled to explain the Val Kilmer thing.
No, I see it. I see it.
Thank you. We're always up for the same stuff. And I'm like, Val, give me a shot. I feel like growing up, I felt fiercely competitive, but not with other women, with men.
Yeah.
And there was this quality growing up of seeing certain kinds of actors and performers like Val, like Nicolas Cage, these sort of, like Jack Nicholson, these very athletic kinds of performances that, as the little girl that I was jealous. And I wanted that. And then later, of course, that evolved as I grew, and, you know, and then I was attracted to other kinds of performances, like Charlotte Rampling or Maggie Chung, but that was how I started off, because it felt like some sort of benign resistance, like some sort of like, I don't, like as a little girl to say like, no, I want that.
I wanted to be Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes.
I saw The Crucible and I was like, I don't want to play the other one, I want to play his part. That was the best part, and he was the best.
Yeah.
He is the best.
Philip
Lily,
Seymour
what about you?
Hoffman
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
and Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
If I can diffuse the two of them into one, those are my two perfect actors, really. I mean, childhood inspirations. It's pretty out there now. I wanted to be an Ewok, and that's what started all this madness.
Really?
Legit. Literally. And I haven't let it go.
Maybe
I feel like we would have been friends. Like, you know, I gotta. Yep, it's a lot of body compression work. I think I can do it. No, yeah.
But you've said, Margot, you wanted to play the boys.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what kind of spawned your production company, right? Like the men always had the best parts in the scripts you're
every
getting.
time I read it, I was like, oh, I want the male role.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, nope. We got to make it so you read the female role and you're like, she's got the best scenes. She's got all the moments. She's got it.
Annette, what about you?
Well, I didn't see a lot of movies as a kid. I did see Sound of Music, so I loved that movie, and I loved Julie Andrews. When I got to be a little bit older, like when I was in community college and I started doing theater, and when I was in high school, and I just loved doing plays, and then I was going to this $1 a unit community college that just happened to have a great theater department. So I started doing plays. I remember seeing at the little art house theater in San Diego, I remember seeing Persona. That was the first time I had seen something like that. Liv Ullmann, Bibi Andersson. So she began to really intrigue me. Liv Ullmann, of course, great actress, made all of those amazing films with Ingmar Bergman. And I began to get interested in that. I didn't really start thinking about doing movies till I was a bit older, but I certainly admired Vanessa Redgrave. She was one of my big heroes. There was something about her quality too that I really admired. And I just did plays for many years, and so then I didn't really start until I was almost 30 to do movies. So I didn't kind of grow up with that mentality of thinking about it. I just couldn't imagine it, kind of. But I would see a great movie, and then I would think, oh, wow, that's so powerful to see a great movie, like loving it, and thinking, well, I guess somebody has to be in them. I remember having that thought. Somebody has to try. Somebody has to be out there saying, maybe could it be me?
Emma, I was thinking about your character Bella in Poor Things. Usually when I ask an actor about a role, I'm thinking, what did you have to learn? What did you have to prepare? And with Bella, I thought, what did you have to unlearn?
And
Yeah, because you're basically playing a child in your grown-up woman's body. So how did you even start with that?
It was Yorgos and I talked about Bella for a long time. He told me about the book and sort of the adaptation that he and Tony were working on. Tony McNamara, who wrote The Favorite and also Cruella. So it was my third time working with Tony by the time we made Poor Things, and he basically gave me the outline, and then we talked about it for 4 years. So I didn't read a draft for like 2 years. So it's just sort of started to, I guess, I've never had a project go on that long or sort of sit with me for that long. So I think it started to just sort of like through osmosis, I would think about aspects of it. But because she's in a full-grown, healthy body, you know, it's not like even you could compare it to like someone who's been in an accident and lost their memory and is relearning how to walk or how to move. That wasn't really comparable. And then also looking at, you know, videos or ideas of like toddlers beginning to walk, their bones are still growing and they're still forming. So she doesn't have that. So we tried to just sort of map her physicality as much as possible, but in a way that it was really amazing because there was nothing to compare it to. It was completely just kind of like, we just experimented with things and he'd be like, no, that's insane. And I'd be like, I know, I'm gonna try this one, whatever.
But insane good.
But insane good, or like God, like in what sense, what do you mean insane? Like, okay. But so we, I mean, the two of us really just kind of talked about it for years. And then, and same with her kind of evolution in language and how she develops and, you know, what words she does or doesn't say, how she refers to herself or other people. She's just my favorite character of all time because of that unlearning. She's totally without shame. She's pure joy and curiosity and experimentation and adventure and has no qualms about her body or her, you know, experience or food or drink or, you know, the way she relates to other people. It's so, it was so inspiring to me on a daily basis. And it was really, like, I miss her all the time because she was she's so alive and so open to life that it was like it was a very inspiring person to get to try to be every day or to live up to.
Did you ever feel embarrassed or like would do something where you like a part of your brain were like, oh my God, I look like an idiot right now? Or do you just get there and you're like completely can do it and get out
similarly
there?
to what you were just saying, I love physical comedy too. I love this sort of, and it, you know, and Yorgos's films are, you know, dark comedies, but they're definitely comedies. It feels like growing up for me, my heroes were Gilda Radner, Molly Shannon. Like I was watching SNL growing up, so like that was my like pinnacle. I loved that world so much. So I think that sort of goofiness or what would be embarrassment is so sort of, I don't know, freeing. I find that so
Totally.
much fun and like. I do not take myself seriously in any way. So people like laughing at something I'm attempting to do doesn't really bother me. But I also, it's a testament to working with a director that you truly, truly trust, admire, believe in, and know is the captain of the ship in a way that you can really let go. Because I think we've probably all worked in experiences where you feel like you also have to be the captain and you don't fully trust that you can do it all or throw it all out there because you don't know what exactly they're seeing or how they're gonna bring it together, which is a really difficult, at least to me, because I don't want to direct. It's really difficult to sort of like have to think in two minds of like, well, if I give you this option
That's
and a
right.
take, you're gonna fucking use it.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
you are,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do that, so I have to, whatever. To not feel that at all, which I don't with Yorgos. I feel like whatever we try, I'm like, I know he's gonna go with whatever is best for the film, is like the greatest
Totally.
thing, you know?
And did you work with like a movement coach or like how did you come up with the physicality?
It was just him and I. We just sort of like in rehearsals we would go and we would have like walking rehearsals, for like a couple hours, and then just like all right, and we created stages. So it was stage 1 to 5. So because at the beginning of the film we're in Willem's character's house, my mad scientist kind of father god, and that was only stage 1 and 5, and we hadn't shot the middle yet.
Yeah.
So it was like her beginning and her end. So all of that we just sort of mapped out. So we knew like, okay, we're in stage 3 right now. Yeah. So for this, these couple of things, we're walking this way, and we sort of were able to like curate it a little bit in that way. But
would you like film it and then have it on your phone so you could be like, oh yeah, this is what stage 3 looks like?
No.
You just rely on Yorgos to be like,
just the sort of feeling of it, because you are going from a progression of that sort of sides of the feet and to walking flat. So whatever that would, I don't know. Is this interesting? Oh, this is what we're here to talk about. I'm kind of every time I talk about acting for more than like 5 minutes, I'm like, sorry about that.
So was Suzuki part of your training then? You said walking on the sides of your feet. Did you do Suzuki method when you were doing your theater?
What is Suzuki method?
I mean, it was developed. It's kind of like martial arts training, but it's for actors because I mean the theory is that you have to be in such command of your instrument as an actor that you could be able to, I think as he said, run toward the lip of a stage and then stop on a dime. So I'm
a very untrained actor.
Lily, I remember you saying that on Killers of the Flower Moon, when you put the blanket on and some of the costume on, it changed the way you sat, it changed the way you stood. How did that sort of shape making Molly?
I mean, I almost had the opposite with the language. I knew that she would be in the language first. And then it's always the last step. You're in the shoes, you're in the clothes, you're in the character until the audience or the crew is there. But yeah, I was most worried about getting the fluency. And I guess it matched. Marty talked about the rewrite of the script initially from the FBI's investigation of these murders, which had reduced Molly to, I think, 3 scenes in the original draft, to inverting it that it was the inside out. I mean, that's kind of, I think, how I had to work with her, because Osage it's one of the more thriving native languages in this country. Most indigenous languages in North America are, anthropologists would say, dead languages. And, meaning that there aren't many first language speakers still alive. And that's very true in a lot of cases. So Osage have a language vitalization, hugely beautiful, cohesive language department that they bring into schools. They have their own orthography. So that was the first thing I did, is I learned the sonic system, because, all this physical training, you're learning the worldview, you're learning the pace of the character. And I found, actually, at the end, I asked for a lot of my scenes that ended up being in English for ease of the audience to read. There were a lot of scenes I had written in English that I asked to be translated into Osage. So almost all of my dialogue at some point I spoke in Osage, and that's where I really found Molly, was in the language first. And it took months to get comfortable with it. Osage is a very difficult language. I speak a little bit of Blackfeet language where I grew up, and I grew up hearing that, so that sonic system and those phonemes and everything were familiar to me. Osage I felt so clunky and so robotic and so stage 1 with it. So when I had kind of a handle of the language, and I guess with Alexander feeling loose with it, then putting on Osage dress and holding myself the way I was told Osage women, especially at the time, hold themselves. I was in my first fitting with Julie O'Keefe, and I remember when my broadcloth skirt, heavy wool in Oklahoma in the middle of summer. Osage are tough people. And it's folded a certain way. It is a folded blanket, and it's all folds and all ties. And when Julie tied me into the skirt, and then my first thought was, I absolutely understand how the Osage Nation gave birth to America's first prima ballerina, Maria Tallchief, and holding the blanket as well. It's like, okay, my foundation was in ballet before acting. I was like, I have to stand first position and hold that blanket and fold it. So, and then to, have this that feels very stiff, that is not very comfortable in a modern body, but then to have ease with it. And what the funny aspect of that was, I have a long torso and short legs. Leo has long legs and a short torso, so when I was sitting as Molly, even in repose as Molly, I always look taller than him, which I love, like embracing that vibe. They had to fly in a little booster for him every time.
Carey, one sort of resource you had as you were working on Maestro is the Bernstein children who were really involved. What kinds of things did you learn from them? How did it help you?
Oh man, so much. They were just so lovely to us. So I kind of signed on to the project about 4 years before we shot it. And not long afterwards, Bradley asked if I wanted to, he said, I want you to really go all in, you know. And I think, like, you know, I thought in my head, oh, okay, but, you know, not really, but yes.
Wink, wink.
You know, because it's, you know, I, again, like, not a trained actor, but, and, you know, so I was a little bit, like, nervous of that. And then, you know, so we started, I don't think there was really a script then, and we were talking, and then at some point I was at his house, and he said, so Yannick Seguin, who's like this incredible conductor at the Philadelphia Orchestra, he said, he was sort of the musical guide, and he said, he wants us to come to Philadelphia and narrate Candide. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yes! What the fuck does that mean? I don't know what that means. That doesn't, what is that, how do you narrate an opera? So anyway, we went and we narrated this opera, and they came, and we rehearsed it for like 3 or 4 days, and then we did 3 performances. And narrating Candide, essentially, there is a narrator. And then we split it, and we did the 3 performances, and they came to I think maybe the final one, and I met them for the first time, and it was like embracing family. They were so unbelievably warm. And still, I mean, every time I see them now, they just sort of grab me and like, you know. And so we Zoomed a bit over the years, and, you know, I started with like a notebook, you know, to take down notes on. And then after a minute, I just thought, well, this is pointless, because the stories were just flying. So, so many amazing anecdotes. And a family that you just wanted to be in, you know, like everything was an inside joke, everything was a secret language, everything was, you know, they just had all these fun, like, traditions, and so a million things about, and, you know, they gave me her lighter, Felicia's lighter, which is in the film. So she got it when she was married, and it's engraved with her name on. So from when they're married, when the film turns to colour, I'm always using her lighter, which was amazing to have. So yeah, I mean, everything.
A lot of smoking.
Oh God.
How was that for you?
So much smoking.
Is that mugwort, or what are we talking?
Those are the, what do you call
herbals.
yeah.
Do you get crazy headaches from those?
Awful.
Yeah. They give me the worst headaches.
But they just
Cigarettes.
smoked, they like famously just smoked constantly. And Jamie writes, so she wrote this amazing book, Jamie Bernstein, called Famous Father Girl, and she talks about being brought down in her pajamas after bath time to see her parents, to say goodnight. And they were sitting in their finery with their cocktails and their friends, and they would be smoking, and they would, you know, give them, and it just, I mean, it sounds so fabulous. Yeah, always.
Well, who did you use as references? Did you use actually Felicia?
Yeah, so there's amazing recordings. This guy, John Gruen, went and spent the summer with them in Ancedonia and interviewed, it was called The Private World of Leonard Bernstein. It's a kind of coffee table book about him and the family a bit, but largely about him, and he interviewed them. And he interviewed her. So there's about 2 sort of 40-minute chunks of her talking. So and that was such a treasure trove, because she talked about, you know, the most exciting thing about it was the first hook was, you know, the idea of 2 artists living concurrently together, making a life together, and one of them being literally touched by God, and the other one being an artist.
She spoke about that in the recording.
Well, she didn't in so many words, but, you know, the sense of, like, you know, Steven Spielberg, who's one of our producers, said to Bradley when they were talking about it originally, you know, she was an amazing actress. She was more successful than Lenny when they first met, but she devoted her life to him. And Steven said of Felicia, Lenny was her art. You know, that she decided that was what she was, the bigger kind of, you know, that was the bigger need in her life, was to be. So yeah, so the tapes and the family were just amazing.
Did you feel like you were able to come to some understanding about how she felt about the marriage, not only him becoming so enormous culturally, but also his affairs with men, how that affected the family? Did you feel like you were able to understand what the impact was on her?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, it's always so tricky, isn't it, when you play a real person? You feel like, I met her kids, but I also went to Chile and I met her Chilean family and her brother-in-law, who was 95 at the time, he sadly passed away, but he was in Anhedonia with them when those tapes were being made, so he knew them so well. And that everyone has their feelings about it. And it's like any family, it's so private how people feel about what's happened to their family members. So I never want to presume on their behalf, but how I saw it, yeah, I did. I felt, there was a very clear sense that she never really committed to her art in the way that he did. And that therefore she was sort of able to kind of give her life over to him. But the betrayal for her was nothing to do with sex or infidelity. It was to do with her being essentially his muse, mentor, best friend, guide, closest confidant. And the moment that he turned to somebody else for that, and in the film you see he goes to Tommy, he goes to Gideon Glick, and in this moment where he's very, very nervous because he's previewing his sort of new piece of work, he reaches for Tommy's hand. And that's the bit that it's not about anything except, what's the point of her existence if she's not that person anymore?
Right. And the scene when you're having lunch afterwards and you're like saying
Oh
how
my
you went on
God,
that
that
date
scene's
and thought
unreal.
he was asking you out. And it's just getting closer and closer to your face. Oh my God.
Yeah, don't you love it when that happens?
Yeah. You feel the camera coming in, you're like, it's brilliant.
Margot, one of the things I really want to know about on Barbie is the pitching of it. You produced it. In a lot of ways, it feels like kind of miracle that this movie got made in the way that it did and sort of as subversive as it is. Can you sort of take us inside the room when you were talking with Warner Brothers and Mattel, particularly about those scenes where you're going to be making fun of Mattel in the movie? What did that look like?
Yeah, the strategy was, obviously it was a long process to first get the property, then get it, set up at Warner's and Mattel and have everyone trust in us as a production company to make it and honor the brand, but also do something relevant and interesting. One of the biggest fights was convincing everyone that it could be a 4-quadrant movie because it had, a budget that necessitated it being a 4-quadrant movie. And that means getting men to go see it. And everyone was just like, there's just no way. Men are never, ever, young or old, are never going to go see a Barbie movie. And we're like, but men will go see a great movie. If it's great, everyone will go see it. People couldn't get past that. But then there was also the stage of, yes, once we had the script and it was like really going for it, I think the strategy I said was, let's just get all comfortable with being very uncomfortable. So every time it was like, tell me your concerns. I totally hear you. I see why that is making you uncomfortable. But that's what we're going to do, and we're just going to have to get comfortable with that feeling. And it was always just like, just get it to the next stage. Like, get it to the next stage. Before you know it, we'll be on set. And then, Greta said, like, the whole approach was like, drive it like you stole it. And that definitely was the approach. We were just like, we just got to keep going. Don't let them stop us. And it was an amazing process. And everyone, to their credit, did get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. I mean, Mattel's literally a character in it. And
Was it always Will Ferrell?
yeah, there was a lot of, like, all the casting choices were very definite. And everyone was so on board for, like, doing it. Yeah, it was.
So when you say, okay, it's going to be a boardroom full of men, they're going to be having a tickle fight, and this is how we're going to show your company, they were down.
Yeah, and I also, like, when you're trying to get a project up and running, as those at the table who produce know, it's like, you're in selling mode. I was like pitching it. I was like, if you pair, like, when you pair Spielberg with dinosaurs, what do you get? $1 billion. You pair Greta and Barbie, we're gonna make $1 billion. You were right. And it did. Thank God, because then I was like, God, I hope this works out. I've just promised everyone $1 billion, and I really hope it does that. But it's just, you just have to, like, double down. I think as a producer, you got to, like, make your choices, and then you back that choice. Like, when you pick a director, you don't hedge your bets and, like, believe in 90% of their ideas. It's like, no, I will bleed myself out before I tell a director they can't have something they need. I'm like, if that's what you need for this, then, like, let me go get, like, I'll make that happen. That's like your job. So there was a lot of just completely doubling down on some crazy, big, bold ideas.
Does pitching feel like auditioning, or does it feel like something different?
Oh, that's an interesting question. No, because it feels like selling. It feels like I'm a con man or something, like I'm a con artist, like convincing everyone that something insane is actually gonna work. Whereas auditioning feels like, I don't know, the funny thing, I'm not good at lying, and people are like, don't you lie for a living? And I'm like, oh, I've never seen acting as that. Like, I feel like acting is making something so incredibly truthful and like making it sound like the most honest thing that could ever come out of your mouth. That's what acting is to me. So actually, I don't think it's lying. Whereas pitching, I feel like it's not lying either, but it's a lot of promising something you don't actually know.
Well, you've got a good track record of delivering now, so
It makes it easier the next time you pitch something.
I bet it
You can
does.
point to it and be like, see, that worked out.
Yeah. Annette, I know that when you were training for Nyad, you trained for a year. There were days where you were swimming 5 hours a day.
Wow.
Why did you feel that level of commitment was necessary? What, and how did it help?
Well, I read the script and I just loved it. I just was completely into her in the whole story. I didn't really think about the swimming, which is so strange, but because I just loved it, and it was just like, so I said yes. And then I realized, wait a minute, bathing suit. Ooh, wait a minute, I'm in a bathing suit. I'm 60-something. Like, what about that? And then I have to do all
You
this swimming.
rock a bathing suit.
Well, I did cross my mind, it wasn't until later. Anyway, so, and I've always been a person who worked out, exercised for my brain as much as my bod. But I was a diver when I was a kid. I was a scuba diver, and I was in the ocean a lot. I worked on a boat. I'm very comfortable jumping in the ocean and all of that. But I had never been a swimmer, so I had to learn. And when I first got in, my impulse was, because it was early on in the process, I thought, oh, I'm just going to start swimming. Like, I have a pool, and I'm just going to jump in. How hard can it be? I was really naive. I was completely, it was overwhelming. And I really got scared. And I thought, what have I done? Wait a minute, I've agreed to this. Wait, can I do this? And I have to make it look right. And does that work? How's that going to work? And, I just went through all of that. And I talk about that because I don't know, I think a lot of us deal with those kinds of fears in a way. And we have to, you have to face your fears in a way in the work, in a good way, like if you're lucky enough. I hired a great coach. She's an Olympian swimmer. Her name's Greta Lee. And, I took a deep breath and she said, okay, show me. Okay, and I did like my version of whatever I thought that was, of freestyle. And she's like, oh yeah, we can make this work. And so she, because of her disposition, because of her nature, she was a great swimmer. She also still loves to swim. Many great athletes burn out on their sport, whatever it is, just because they've just done it so much. But she's tall, and she got in the pool with me and just immediately started showing me, what the technique was. And that is an interesting process anytime physically you're learning a new skill, because of course the experts know how to break it down. Well, the breathing is here and it's only this much, and then the arm goes here and the legs is very little, and that, there's this whole thing. And of course, as a beginner, you're thinking about 25 different things, which you cannot do. The only thing you can do really is think about one thing at a time, actually. So that takes it's the practice. And of course, what happens with swimming is that you start to fall in love with it because it makes you feel so good. It's so good for the central nervous system. I have a very active mind, and a lot of exercise has always been for me to try to calm my mind. So I began to feel the benefits physically as well as emotionally and physically. Then we started talking about Diana. What is her stroke like? I had to learn to breathe on the left because she breathes on the left. The boat has to be here. Jodie's there, playing Bonnie, my coach in the movie. And so we started working on the more, on that. I have to breathe to the left. And I just worked really, really hard. And the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it. Then Diana came over to my house. I got to know her.
Did you spend time with her?
Yeah, I got to know her very well. She's a really interesting woman. And if she was here, she would be the most interesting person in the room. She just is. She's just one of those people. and she's extraordinary, and she earned it. You know, she had to earn that in life, which is what I love about her. Anyway, so I did get to know her very well, and then she did come over, and I was nervous. I was like, okay, now I'm going to swim for Diana. Although they did put me on video, you know, because there's like people somewhere out there who are like, how's she doing with the swimming? And it's like, she did video me, so they were like.
But she came to watch you.
She did. She came to my house, and I was like, okay, here it is. And,
Did she give notes?
She, you know what? That's a good question. I don't remember her giving notes. I remember she had some ideas about training and stuff, but no, she just immediately was like, oh, Annette, I'm so happy. And I was wearing her swimsuit, and she liked that. And,
Nice.
you know, she's a very, very dear person, and she's a badass, and she's smart and funny and just unapologetic about who she is as a human being. And she earned that. You know, now she's 74, and she's, you know, but she's a remarkable person. Yeah, I love her.
I'm going to ask a few just light and breezy questions with the little time that we have left. And one of them is, what's it like when your parents see your performance?
Oh God.
My parents came to see Maestro at the London Film Festival with my brother and my sister-in-law, and we're all on a WhatsApp chain. And I came into London. I didn't go to anything, but I came in to see the Bernstein kids and have dinner with them whilst it was playing. So I was at a restaurant and I was waiting for the film to finish so that I could, see what they were going to say. And I was at this restaurant and I said, I've got the table from whatever, just, I'll order some food, whatever. And I'm waiting, and then, someone says, oh, I think the film must be over by now. And I'm like, okay. And then suddenly my phone lights up and it's the family WhatsApp group. And I'm like, oh, fuck, okay. And my sister-in-law just says, Owen, my brother, wants the steak fried. And I was like, oh, no. Okay, cool. And that was the first, and I was like, guys! They came and they were lovely and whatever. But I think it's just I'm 25 to 57 in Maestro, and for my mum to watch that must just be. First of all, I look like my mother in the later scenes when I have like the prosthetics on and I'm playing Felicia Older. But I think for her it just must be like, and upsetting and weird and sad, and I'm sure very proud, and we're English, so. Yeah. But,
They sound Korean to me. Very similar in the WhatsApp too. That whole infrastructure sounds very familiar. Yeah. My parents, they obviously knew for months that I was doing this movie in Korean, and that I was nervous about it and felt, I had to step up to do it. And then the trailer came out, and I sent it to my parents, and I got a text from my mom that was like, oh my God, it's in Korean. And I was like, yes, I'd been telling you for months, and it's like you didn't believe me that it was actually going to be in Korean. But then I realized for them to process like what that is was really jarring. They could not accept that it was actually going to be in Korean. And they're, normally very maybe stoic, or just, they've seen the things that I've done, but it's never really been part of our relationship to be overly celebratory about certain things. But I have to say, though, after my mom went to see Past Lives, and afterwards she was sobbing, and I don't even know if I've seen her cry before. Oh. And I was deeply uncomfortable with what was happening. But she was a wreck, and I, in that moment, it was a premiere. I didn't feel like we could really get into it, and several days passed, and she called me and she said, I'm driving. She said, I'm still crying. I said, oh my God, what's wrong? Is everything okay? And she said, I'm Nora.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Wow. And I was like, what? She said, in her way, she said, you think this movie is about you, but it's about me. Oh. But behind that was a real sense of seeing herself that I really did not expect. And that, and that now I feel like I know her in a different way.
It's a gift to take your mom on an emotional journey like that through your work. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What did your parents say?
My dad has just always put it in my head that this is what I was going to do. My parents have always been...
That's amazing.
I know, I owe them everything. So I grew up rural Montana on a reservation. It's like the world is telling you it's impossible for you. And your access to the outside world when you're living remotely is film, is TV, is all of it. I don't know. I just kind of always had a certainty about it. And yet I love it that a lot of the stuff that I do, maybe it wouldn't be like the choices my dad would make for me. And I don't think he always sees or appreciates what I do. My mom does. But my dad, in a way of like not giving me critique, but also giving me praise, he says, that film was so profound, yet very simple. That film was, he will pick the two contradicting phrases and say both. And I'm just
beautiful.
like, I mean, it is, but it's also him just being like, he doesn't know what the fuck the movie's about.
Covering his bases.
But he's, even so, like.
So your parents like know film enough, like they're film people enough that they could
my
appreciate it
grandma,
was a
too.
Scorsese film. You know, like I remember telling I'm like, it's Scorsese, and they're all like, no.
Right?
Were your family like, you're doing a Scorsese film?
I mean, yeah, my dad's favorite movie is Kundun. That was my introduction to Marty. I had no idea about like Goodfellas or anything. I hadn't watched that Marty. Yeah, it's and my grandma even. My grandma was born and raised in a like little log cabin. She was born during the Depression on the Nez Perce Reservation in Lapway. Premature, you know, like just survived all odds. But she loved movies. She was around when we told her that I'd gotten cast in this. My grandma, like, she went and saw Taxi Driver in the theater when it came out in the 70s.
Wow.
You know, like, loved film. And she cooed at me like Shirley Temple, like I think a lot of grandmas from the 30s. You know, it's like I said, you know, res kids a lot of times, like, our view of the outside world is first shaped by like cinema. But we told her, like, yeah, I'm gonna be in a Martin Scorsese film. Oh, Martin Scorsese with Robert De Niro. Ooh, Robert De Niro. And Leonardo DiCaprio. Ooh. And then I pulled Titanic out of her collection. Oh.
That's amazing.
Wait, can I ask something really quickly? Now that we're all best friends and I don't want to steal all of your secrets. In terms of duality, I'm so curious to know what you guys think about comedy and drama. And that the differences in if you approach it differently or how you think about that. I don't
harder,
know.
Right?
It's the hardest. I think,
it's like
but
really, really hard.
It's like super hard.
Yeah.
But I heard this thing. I just heard Matthew McConaughey, and I don't know if we're allowed to bring up men, but I heard him say this thing about how he approaches drama like a comedy and comedy like a drama, which I thought was really interesting. And I feel like I'm getting asked this a lot in terms of like how do you like reconcile the two genres and style and in terms of tone and pacing, and I'm curious if what do you think about that?
I do think comedy's harder, definitely harder than drama. I feel less scared that I'm going to pull off like a big screaming, crying scene than I am that I'm going to pull off a funny scene.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I know I can scream and shout and cry and do all that stuff, but like, can I make people laugh? I don't know. But I think it requires the same level of commitment that like, it's all in, because if you take even an inch off the pedal there, it's like going to fall flat on its face. Yeah. It's interesting, that McConaughey quote, though. Like, that is kind of...
Well, I was thinking about like comedy being tension and timing, and then thinking about the most dramatic scenes, that's also true. That inherent sense, it's like a tickle. That it's hard to explain, but it feels for me
it's
the
same.
time.
It's the time. Like, comedic timing is such a thing.
Yeah.
That I feel like you don't have to be quite so spot on with the timing when it comes to drama.
But I feel like you do. And when I
Really?
watch your work, I feel that same sense of timing, of tension timing, of it's almost like playing to a live audience where there's
Because you are when you're in a scene with someone, you're in the same way as like a conversation with someone. You're feeling out what is going to happen next, what's coming from them. Like you were saying, reacting. You are watching someone move, and you're responding as such. And in that sense, I feel like comedy and drama are the same.
Right.
and life is constantly encapsulating both.
Yeah.
Like something that's just serious and never has levity does not make sense to me, because when someone's dying, you find a reason, like everybody bursts into laughter because the tension's so high at a certain point, or they, like it always lives in tandem.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think the timing is constant, whether it's, called comedy or drama.
It's always like revelation. I feel like in drama, like the revelation of an emotion is where you get some of the catharsis and maybe the audience comes along for it. And the same with a joke. A revelation is almost like a punchline.
Yeah.
Speaking of timing, we do have to wind down.
Is it something we said?
If this were up to me, we would be here all day, but I know that you can't do that. What is the most used emoji on your phone?
That
one.
Yeah, I do that
That
one a
one's
lot.
good.
I think mine's the brain explosion one.
Mine's the melting smiley.
I love the melting smiley.
And it's really helpful.
And the smiley with the sunnies, I do a lot too.
There's also one that's like that.
Oh yeah.
I love that one.
What does this one mean?
Oh, the up above.
Full circle.
Like people go like this.
What does that
I
mean?
thought it's used in tandem with the X, like it's an XO.
Oh. Because I feel like
adorable.
I think. I don't know.
But there's
this
also
is my
just an XO, isn't there?
seven-
Like
not
an
in
X
one.
and an O?
Well,
but
there are
I never
two.
know what it means when you I like send a text to someone and they'll go,
You just do it to them back.
It's like you made a goal.
or like I don't know, or
I have no idea.
I've become a fan of the sparklies.
The sparklies.
Yeah, the stars, like the 3 little stars. That's a good frame.
coming around to head.
Yeah, it's like
A good
you know,
framer
it's
for
a good
the
frame.
text. It's a nice frame.
The emoji is the art, the sparkles are the frame.
Do a toast.
Let's do it, tell us.
To you, ladies.
Thanks, y'all, so
Fabulous
so
show.
much. Cheers. Yay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, that hour flew by, but we learned so much, guys. I mean, from how to lie to a 5-year-old about what you really do for a living, to the most used emojis on their phones. Wow. Oh, that's right. We also talked about acting, too. Until next time, I'm Yvonne Orji, and this has been Off Script with The Hollywood Reporter.